My wife said, "My ex-lover is joining us for Christmas dinner. Be mature about it." I nodded. Of course. What she didn't know was that I invited her ex's fiancé too. The dinner table turned into a scene nobody in my family will ever forget. Look, I'm going to be real with you right from the jump. I'm not some hero in this story. I'm just a regular dude who thought he had life figured out. You know, I had a decent job that didn't make me want to throw myself into traffic every Monday morning, a wife who I genuinely loved, spoiler alert, hold that thought, and a solid collection of vinyl records that I'd been building since college, because apparently I'm pretentious like that. Wednesday nights were my favorite because that's when I'd cook dinner. Nothing fancy, just good old-fashioned comfort food that reminded me I was an actual functioning adult and not some overgrown kid eating cereal for every meal like I did in my early 20s. So there I was, standing in our kitchen that we'd renovated last spring after watching way too many HGTV shows, stirring a pot of spaghetti like some kind of domestic god. The pasta was doing that thing where it's perfectly al dente. The sauce was bubbling away with just the right amount of garlic because, let's be honest, there's no such thing as too much garlic. And Mariah Carey was belting out "All I Want for Christmas Is You" from the speaker on the counter. I was humming along completely off-key, but not giving a single damn because nobody was judging me. Or so I thought. The kitchen smelled incredible, like basil and tomatoes and those Italian dreams you have after watching too many Sopranos episodes. I was in my zone, my safe space, my little bubble of, hey, maybe adulthood isn't the absolute dumpster fire everyone said it would be. Chloe was sitting at the kitchen table, phone in hand, scrolling with the kind of intensity that suggested she was either reading something deeply important or stalking her high school friends to see who got fat. Her blonde hair was pulled back in one of those messy buns that somehow looked effortlessly perfect, and she was wearing my old college sweatshirt that she'd basically stolen from my closet 3 years ago and never returned. We'd been married for 5 years at this point, together for 7, and I thought we were solid. Like going to grow old together and argue about thermostats kinda solid. Sure, we had our moments, every couple does, but nothing that made me think our relationship was circling the drain or anything. Then she dropped the bomb. Just casually, like she was commenting on the weather or asking me to pick up milk on the way home. "So, my ex-lover Adrian is joining us for Christmas dinner. Be mature about it." I'm going to need you to understand something here. Time literally stopped. Like, I'm talking full-on movie moment where everything goes into slow motion and you can hear your own heartbeat pounding in your ears. The wooden spoon I was holding froze mid-stir, and I swear the spaghetti noodles were clinging to it like they knew something terrible had just happened and they were holding on for dear life. Mariah was still singing about Christmas, completely oblivious to the fact that my world was currently imploding in a suburban kitchen that still had a mortgage. I turned around slowly, probably looking like some kind of confused owl, and I just stared at her. She wasn't even looking up from her phone, just sitting there scrolling away like she just told me she was thinking about getting bangs or something, equally mundane. My brain was doing that thing where it tries to process information, but all the circuits are firing wrong. Like when you accidentally put aluminum foil in the microwave and everything just starts sparking and making weird noises. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice coming out way calmer than I felt inside. "Could you repeat that? Because I think I just had a minor stroke and my ears stopped working properly." She looked up then, gave me this little smile that I'd usually find cute, but in that moment made me want to launch myself into the sun, and repeated it, word for word. "Adrian is joining us for Christmas dinner. My ex. I invited him. Be mature about it." There it was again. Be mature about it. Like she was asking me to be cool about her choosing a different Netflix show or something, not inviting the dude she used to bang to my parents' house for the most important family dinner of the year. I stood there, sauce starting to burn on the stove because I'd completely forgotten about it, trying to figure out if this was real life or if I'd somehow fallen into an alternate dimension where spouses just casually invite their exes to family gatherings and expected their partners to throw confetti and celebrate. Why? I finally managed to ask, turning down the heat on the stove before I burned down the house we were still paying for. Why on God's green earth would you invite your ex-boyfriend to Christmas dinner at my parents' house where my entire family will be? Chloe put her phone down, first time in 20 minutes by the way, and gave me this look that was probably supposed to be sympathetic, but came across more like I was a child who didn't understand basic arithmetic. He's going through a really tough time right now, Daniel. He's lonely. He doesn't have family nearby, and I thought it would be nice to include him. It's the season of giving and goodwill toward men and all that, right?
Oh, absolutely. The season of goodwill. How could I forget? Let's just invite every ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, and random person we've ever hooked up with to family dinner, because Jesus said to love thy neighbor or whatever. Maybe we should invite her orthodontist from middle school too. Really make it a party. I took a deep breath, counted to 5 in my head like my therapist taught me during those anger management sessions I took after the incident with my boss. Long story, different disaster. And tried to approach this rationally. Chloe, honey, sweetheart, love of my life. Christmas dinner is at my parents' house. It's a family thing. You can't just invite random people, especially not people you used to sleep with. He's not random, she shot back, getting that defensive tone that usually meant this conversation was about to go sideways fast. We were together for 3 years. He's important to me. And it's not like I'm still in love with him or anything. I just want to help a friend out during the holidays. A friend? Sure. Because everyone stays super close friends with their exes and thinks about them enough to invite them to intimate family gatherings. That's totally normal and not at all a giant red flag the size of Texas. Here's where it got really good, though. I asked her the obvious question. Did you at least ask my mom if this was okay, since it's, her house and her dinner that she's been planning for 2 months? Chloe smiled. Actually, smiled, like she just won some kind of prize. I did, actually. I called her this morning. She said it was fine, and that we should all be more welcoming and charitable during the holidays. And that was the part that absolutely destroyed me. Not the fact that she'd invited Adrian, not even the sheer audacity of thinking this was remotely appropriate. No, what really twisted the knife was that she'd gone behind my back, called my own mother, and gotten approval before even mentioning it to me. My own mom had conspired against me. The woman who gave birth to me, raised me, kissed my scraped knees, and taught me how to ride a bike, had sided with my wife on the absolutely insane decision to invite her ex-lover to our family Christmas dinner. I stood there in that kitchen, sauce now definitely burning despite my best efforts, Mariah Carey mocking me with her joy and cheer, and I realized something important. I was married to someone who thought this was okay. Someone who valued her ex-boyfriend's feelings over her husband's comfort. Someone who went behind my back to my own mother to get permission for something that should have never even been a question. So I did what any mature, rational adult would do in this situation. I smiled. A big, bright, totally fake smile that probably made me look like a serial killer, but whatever. I turned off the stove, walked over to her, put my hand on her shoulder, and said in the sweetest voice I could muster, "Of course, honey, you're absolutely right. I'll be completely mature about it. Adrian is more than welcome at Christmas dinner." She looked relieved. Actually relieved, like she'd been worried I might object or cause problems, or I don't know, act like a normal human being who has boundaries and self-respect? Thank you, she said, squeezing my hand. I knew you'd understand. This is why I love you. You're so emotionally evolved. Emotionally evolved. That's what she called it. I nodded, kept smiling, and went back to the stove to salvage what was left of dinner. But inside? Inside, the gears were already turning. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about being mature. Sometimes being mature means playing the long game. Sometimes it means smiling and nodding while you're secretly planning the most epic karma-filled holiday surprise since Scrooge got visited by 3 ghosts. Spoiler alert, I was about to be very, very mature about this whole situation. The most mature I'd ever been in my entire life. So mature that people would write legends about my maturity. Christmas card-worthy maturity. I just needed to do a little research first. So here's the thing about trying to fall asleep when your wife has just casually dropped a nuclear bomb on your marriage. It's basically impossible. I'm talking full-on staring at the ceiling like it's going to suddenly reveal the meaning of life, or at least explain what the hell just happened in my kitchen 3 hours ago. Chloe was beside me, sleeping like an actual baby, breathing all peaceful and steady like she hadn't just invited her ex-lover to Christmas dinner and completely obliterated my sense of reality. Meanwhile, I was lying there doing mental gymnastics, trying to figure out if I'd somehow slipped into an alternate universe where this kind of behavior was considered normal and acceptable. The bedroom was dark, except for the little bit of streetlight creeping through the curtains. And I could hear our neighbor's dog barking at absolutely nothing, because that's what dogs do at midnight. They bark at ghosts or leaves or their own existential dread. Who knows? I kept replaying the conversation in my head, analyzing every word, every facial expression, trying to find the moment where things went sideways. Was it when she called my mom behind my back? Was it when she smiled like she'd done something thoughtful instead of completely insane? Or was it the part where she told me to be mature about it, like I was some kind of toddler who needed a lesson in sharing?
Around midnight, after counting approximately 8 million ceiling tiles and contemplating every life choice I'd made since middle school, I gave up on sleep entirely. The curiosity was eating me alive, like some kind of parasite that feeds on your peace of mind and replaces it with paranoia and conspiracy theories. I needed answers. I needed to know what the hell was really going on here, because my gut, that trusty internal alarm system that had saved me from bad decisions more times than I could count, was screaming that something was seriously wrong with this whole situation. I turned my head slightly and looked at Chloe, still sleeping peacefully, her phone sitting right there on the nightstand like a little treasure chest full of secrets. Now, I know what you're thinking. Daniel, don't do it, man. That's a violation of privacy. That's crossing a line you can't uncross. And you're absolutely right. Under normal circumstances, I would never, ever go through my wife's phone. I'm not that guy. I believe in trust and respect and all those relationship fundamentals that therapists talk about on podcasts. But here's the thing. These were not normal circumstances. These were, my wife invited her ex-boyfriend to Christmas dinner and I'm pretty sure I'm being gaslit circumstances, which I'm pretty confident fall under the exception clause of the relationship rulebook. So I did it. I reached over, moving as slowly as a sloth on sedatives, because the last thing I needed was for her to wake up and catch me mid-investigation, and I grabbed her phone. My heart was pounding like I was defusing a bomb in an action movie, and my hands were actually shaking a little bit, which was ridiculous because this was my wife, not some stranger. I knew her passcode, 1234, because apparently she had the cybersecurity awareness of a potato. and I unlocked that phone faster than you can say trust issues. The screen lit up, temporarily blinding me like I just stared directly into the sun, and I quickly turned down the brightness before I woke up the entire neighborhood with my nuclear-powered investigation light. I went straight to her messages, scrolling past the usual stuff, group chats with her work friends complaining about their boss, texts from her sister about some Netflix show, a reminder from her dentist about a cleaning appointment, normal stuff, boring stuff. The kind of stuff that makes you feel guilty for snooping because maybe you're just being paranoid and everything is actually fine. Then I found it, the chat with Adrian. And let me tell you, it was like opening Pandora's box. Except, instead of releasing all the evils into the world, it just released all the confirmation of my worst fears directly into my brain. I started scrolling up, going back through weeks of messages, and holy mother of red flags, it was bad. Like emotional affair that's definitely headed toward physical territory bad. The messages weren't explicitly sexual or anything. Chloe is too smart for that. She knows how to cover her tracks. But they were intimate in that way that's somehow worse than just hooking up. It was all feelings and memories and what-if conversations that made my stomach twist into knots. Adrian had written, "I miss what we had. Things were so simple back then. You know, we just got each other." And Chloe, my wife, the woman who promised to forsake all others when we stood at that altar 5 years ago, had responded, "I know. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we tried harder, if we'd been more mature back then." Tried harder? Tried harder? Lady, you can't even open a jar of pickles without calling me into the kitchen like I'm some kind of emergency jar opening service. And you're sitting here wondering what would have happened if you tried harder with your ex? The audacity, the sheer unfiltered audacity of this woman was actually impressive in a horrifying sort of way. I kept scrolling, my detective hat firmly in place, and it just got worse. There were messages about how she felt stuck sometimes, how she wondered if she'd settled down too fast, how Adrian really understood her in ways that apparently I didn't, despite literally living with her and doing her laundry and listening to her complain about her coworkers for 5 straight years. There were inside jokes and references to their past relationship, little heart emojis that made me want to throw the phone across the room. And worst of all, there were messages about Christmas dinner. "Adrian, are you sure your husband's gonna be cool with me being there? Seems kinda weird, no offense." "Chloe, Daniel's really mature and understanding. He won't make it weird. Plus, my mother-in-law already said yes, so it's happening. I really want you there." She really wanted him there. Not, "I felt bad for you being alone," or "it seemed like the charitable thing to do." No, she wanted him there. At my parents' house. At our family Christmas dinner. This wasn't about charity or holiday spirit or any of that nonsense she'd sold me earlier. This was about her wanting to see her ex-boyfriend, wanting to have him in her life, wanting to keep that door open for whatever future possibilities her mind was cooking up. My hands were shaken for real now, not from nervousness, but from pure, unfiltered rage mixed with heartbreak and a dash of, "I can't believe this is actually happening to me." I was that guy now. The guy whose wife is emotionally cheating. The guy who has to snoop through phones at midnight because his reality has become a Jerry Springer episode. The guy who's getting played in his own marriage. But here's where I surprised myself. Instead of waking her up right then and there, instead of starting a screaming match at 12:30 in the morning that would definitely result in the neighbors calling the cops, I did something way smarter. I took screenshots, lots of them. Every incriminating message, every flirty exchange, every single piece of evidence that proved this wasn't just about helping out a friend during the holidays. I was moving through that phone like the FBI during a raid, like a caffeinated investigator with a vendetta and a smartphone. Screenshot, screenshot, screenshot. I sent them all to my own phone, watching each message whoosh through the digital universe and land safely in my text messages. Evidence secured. Case building. Revenge brewing. I was half detective, half heartbroken, and half completely done with this nonsense. Yes, that's 3 halves. Math doesn't matter when your life is falling apart. By the time I was done, I had approximately 40 screenshots documenting weeks of emotional infidelity. I carefully placed her phone back on the nightstand, exactly where it had been, screen facing down just like she'd left it. Then I lay back down, staring at that same ceiling, but this time with a completely different mindset. I wasn't sad anymore. Don't get me wrong, part of me was absolutely devastated. The part that had loved this woman, that had built a life with her, that had imagined growing old together and arguing about which retirement home had the best shuffleboard courts, that part was shattered into about 8 million pieces. But the dominant emotion, the one that was drowning out everything else, was something else entirely. It was strategic. It was calculated. It was the feeling you get when you're about to flip the script on someone who thought they were playing you. I wasn't just going to let this slide. I wasn't going to be mature in the way she expected. You know, the doormat kind of mature where I smile and nod while she parades her ex around my family like some kind of emotional support peacock. No, I was going to be mature in a different way. The kind of mature that involves careful planning, perfect timing, and making absolutely sure that when the truth comes out, it comes out in the most spectacular karma-filled way possible. Chloe wanted Adrian at Christmas dinner? Fine, he could come. But he wasn't going to be the only surprised guest at that party. Because by morning, I wasn't sad Daniel anymore, the confused husband wondering what he did wrong. I was strategic Daniel, the man with a plan and 40 screenshots worth of ammunition. Game on. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of purpose usually reserved for people training for marathons or planning military coups. Chloe had already left for work, some early morning meeting that she'd mentioned last week, but that I'd completely tuned out because apparently my subconscious knew she wasn't worth my full attention anymore. I made myself a pot of coffee so strong it could probably strip paint off walls, sat down at my laptop, and became what I can only describe as a digital stalker with a righteous cause. First order of business, figure out who the hell Adrian actually was, beyond just Chloe's ex-boyfriend who's apparently having a rough time. Because here's the thing about people who claim they're going through something difficult, 9 times out of 10, they're either lying, exaggerating, or they cause their own problems and want sympathy for it. I had a feeling Adrian fell into at least 2 of those categories, possibly all 3 if I was lucky. I started with the basics, Facebook, because apparently people still use that dinosaur of a social media platform to document their entire lives for their aunt's friends to comment on. I typed in Adrian, plus the last name I remembered Chloe mentioning once or twice in the early days of our relationship when she was still being honest about her past. Adrian Kershaw. Sounded like a name that belonged to either a British poet or a guy who wears too much cologne and calls women females. I was betting on the latter. His Facebook profile popped up immediately because the dude had his privacy settings looser than a gas station hot dog that's been sitting under the heat lamp since Tuesday. And what do you know? His relationship status was right there at the top of his page, bold as day. Engaged to Clara Mills. Engaged? Engaged? This man was engaged to be married, and he was out here texting my wife about missing what they had and wondering what could have been. The rough time he was supposedly going through wasn't some tragic loss or career setback or health crisis. No, the rough time was probably just the normal stress of wedding planning mixed with the fact that he was apparently a dirtbag who couldn't let go of his ex-girlfriend, even though he was literally promising to spend the rest of his life with someone else. I sat back in my chair, took a long sip of my nuclear coffee, and let this information sink in. Adrian wasn't some lonely, pathetic guy who needed the warmth of human connection during the holidays. He was an engaged man who was emotionally cheating on his fiancée while my wife emotionally cheated on me with him. It was like a cheating inception, a betrayal turducken, and somehow neither of them thought this was a problem worth mentioning.
But wait, it gets better. I clicked on Clara's profile next, because if I was going down this rabbit hole, I was going all the way to Wonderland. Her page was exactly what you'd expect from someone who probably had no idea her fiancé was a walking red flag factory. Her profile picture showed a woman with kind eyes, a genuine smile, and the kind of wholesome energy that made you think she probably volunteered at animal shelters on weekends and sent birthday cards to her grandmother. She looked way too nice to be caught up in this absolute dumpster fire of a situation. I scrolled through her photos, pictures of her and Adrian at various events, looking happy and coupley, doing that thing where they both tilt their heads the same direction for photos like they practiced it in a mirror. There were engagement pictures from what looked like 3 months ago, taken at some park with fall leaves and golden hour lighting, the kind of photos you'd see in a wedding magazine. Clara was holding up her hand, showing off the ring, Adrian was kissing her cheek, and the caption said something about, "Can't wait to marry my best friend," with approximately 40 heart emojis. Her Instagram was even more wholesome. Lots of inspirational quotes about love and trust, pictures of coffee cups and sunsets, a few workout selfies with captions about self-care and personal growth. There were posts about wedding planning, asking her followers for advice on centerpieces and whether she should do a live band or a DJ. This woman was actively planning her wedding to a man who was simultaneously planning to spend Christmas dinner with his ex-girlfriend at her husband's parents' house. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife and serve it at said Christmas dinner. I felt something I didn't expect in that moment, genuine sympathy for Clara. She was over here living her life, planning her wedding, posting about table settings and dress fittings, completely oblivious to the fact that her fiancé was a lying scumbag. She didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve to be the other woman who didn't even know she was the other woman. And honestly, she deserved to know the truth just as much as I deserved to blow this whole thing wide open. So I did something that was either absolutely brilliant or completely insane, depending on how you look at it. I created a burner Instagram account, not with my name, obviously, I'm not an idiot. I called it holiday_concerned guy because subtlety is important when you're about to drop a truth bomb on a stranger's life. I used some random stock photo of a Christmas tree as the profile picture, wrote a bio that said, "Just trying to spread truth this holiday season." And then I sat there for about 10 minutes crafting the perfect message. It needed to be informative but not aggressive, honest but not cruel, the kind of message that would make her pay attention without making her think I was some crazy stalker who got off on ruining people's holidays. After about 7 drafts, I finally settled on this. "Hey Clara, I know this is going to sound weird, and I'm sorry to message you out of the blue, but I thought you should know something. Your fiancé's ex-girlfriend invited him to Christmas dinner at her husband's parents' house. That husband is me. His name is Daniel, and I only found out about this a couple days ago. Adrian told my wife he was going through a rough time, and she felt bad for him. I'm guessing he didn't tell you about this dinner. Anyway, I thought you deserved to know. Merry Christmas, and I'm really sorry you got dragged into this mess." I read it over about 15 times, checking for typos and making sure it hit the right tone. Then, before I could chicken out or overthink it even more, I hit send. The message whooshed away into the digital void, and I sat there staring at my screen like I was waiting for test results from a doctor. For about 45 minutes, nothing happened. I started second-guessing myself, wondering if maybe I'd crossed a line or if Clara would just block me and write me off as some weirdo. I made another pot of coffee, less nuclear this time, because my hands were already shaking from caffeine and adrenaline, and tried to distract myself by pretending to work on some reports I was supposed to finish by Friday. Then my phone buzzed. Notification. Clara had responded. My heart actually skipped a beat. I'm not being dramatic. I felt that thing do a little stuttery jump in my chest, like it forgot how to work for a second. I opened the message, and what I saw made me want to simultaneously high-five myself and pour one out for this poor woman. Are you serious right now? Adrian told me he had a work party that night. A work party. He said it was mandatory and that he'd probably be out late because his boss was hosting it at his house. I thought it was weird that a work party was on Christmas, but he said his boss was Jewish, so it wasn't a big deal for them. Oh my God. Oh my God. I can't believe this. There it was. The confirmation I needed. Adrian had straight up lied to his fiancée about where he was going on Christmas. Not just a little white lie, but a fully constructed, detailed fabrication, complete with a fake Jewish boss and everything. The audacity of this man was actually impressive in the worst possible way. I wrote back immediately. I'm dead serious. I have screenshots of the messages between him and my wife if you want to see them. They're not sexual or anything, but they're definitely inappropriate. Lots of "I miss you" and "what if we tried harder" type stuff. I'm really sorry you're finding out this way. Her response came back in under 2 minutes. Yes, send them please. I need to see everything. So I did. I sent her every single screenshot I'd taken the night before. Each one a little nail in Adrian's coffin. I watched the read receipt pop up and then disappear as she went through them, and I could only imagine what was going through her head. The betrayal, the anger, the feeling of being made a fool of by someone you trusted. We ended up messaging back and forth for about 30 minutes. Clara told me she'd been with Adrian for 2 years, engaged for 3 months, and planning a wedding for next October. She said she'd had some weird feelings about him lately. He'd been distant, on his phone a lot, making excuses to go out alone. But she'd written it off as wedding stress or work pressure. She never imagined he was still hung up on his ex. I told her about Chloe, about how she'd invited him behind my back, about how my own mother had approved it without talking to me first. We bonded over our shared experience of being with people who apparently didn't respect us enough to be honest. It was like the saddest support group ever, except it was just 2 strangers messaging on Instagram about their terrible significant others. Then Clara said something that made me grin like the Grinch planning to steal Christmas. You know what? If you're serious about all this, if this dinner is really happening, I want to come. I stared at that message for a solid 10 seconds, my brain doing calculations about how absolutely nuclear this could go. Then I wrote back, "Are you sure? It's going to be messy, like potentially explosive. My whole family will be there." Her response was immediate. "I'm sure. Adrian wants to play games? Let's play. Besides, I deserve to see the look on his face when he realizes he's been caught." I couldn't argue with that logic. In fact, I loved that logic. I loved it so much I wanted to frame it and hang it on my wall. So I told her, "Please do come. Bring wine. You're definitely going to need it. I'll text you the address and time." We exchanged actual phone numbers after that, moving the conversation off Instagram because at some point you have to upgrade from burner account messages to real communication. Clara seemed like a genuinely good person who'd been dealt a garbage hand by a garbage human. And me? I was starting to feel like maybe I wasn't the only victim here. Maybe this was bigger than just my marriage falling apart. Maybe this was about holding people accountable for their actions and making sure that lies don't get to masquerade as truth during what's supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year. Christmas dinner was going to be one for the books. The week leading up to Christmas was possibly the most surreal experience of my entire life, and I once accidentally walked into the women's bathroom at a movie theater and didn't realize it until I was washing my hands next to someone applying lipstick. So, that's saying something. I had to live with Chloe, sleep next to her, have normal married people conversations with her, all while knowing that I was sitting on information that was going to detonate like a nuclear warhead at Christmas dinner. It was like being an undercover agent in my own house, except instead of gathering intelligence on foreign threats, I was just trying not to burst out laughing every time she mentioned how nice it was that Adrian could join us. Chloe was in full holiday mode, which apparently meant transforming our house into something that looked like a Christmas store had exploded inside it. There were decorations everywhere, garland on the staircase, lights around every window, a tree so big I'm pretty sure it violated some kind of building code. She spent her evenings baking cookies that filled the house with the smell of cinnamon and sugar, humming along to Christmas carols like she was auditioning for a Hallmark movie. She even broke out the fancy apron her grandmother had given her, the one with little reindeer on it that she only wore when she was feeling particularly domestic. The whole thing would have been adorable if it wasn't completely nauseating given the circumstances. She was playing house, pretending everything was perfect, living in this fantasy world where inviting your ex-boyfriend to your husband's family Christmas dinner was just a normal, charitable act of holiday kindness. Meanwhile, I was walking around with screenshots on my phone and a secret alliance with said ex-boyfriend's fiancée, counting down the days until the whole charade came crashing down like a gingerbread house in an earthquake. The really challenging part was keeping my cool. Every time Chloe mentioned Adrian, which was approximately 47 times a day, I had to bite my tongue so hard I'm surprised I didn't draw blood. She'd say things like, "I wonder if Adrian likes pecan pie or pumpkin pie better," or "I hope Adrian doesn't feel awkward being around your family," or my personal favorite, "It's so sweet that you're being so mature about this whole thing." That last one almost broke me. I had to leave the room and go stand in the garage for 5 minutes, taking deep breaths and reminding myself that revenge is a dish best served cold, preferably on Christmas with a side of public humiliation. I checked in with Clara almost daily, making sure she was still on board with the plan and hadn't backed out or decided this was all too crazy. But honestly, the more we talked, the more I realized she was just as invested in this as I was. She'd done her own digging after our initial conversation and had found even more evidence of Adrian's shadiness. Apparently, he'd been staying late at work a lot recently, which Clara now realized were probably the nights he was texting Chloe. He'd also been weirdly protective of his phone, taking it with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. Classic cheater behavior, the kind of stuff they probably teach in Infidelity 101. Clara sent me updates throughout the week, mostly just messages saying things like, "Still can't believe this is happening," or "Found another lie. He said he was with his brother last Tuesday, but his brother was out of town." We were like two detectives comparing notes, except instead of solving a murder, we were just uncovering the fact that our significant others were terrible people. She told me she'd already picked out her outfit for Christmas dinner, a red sweater that she'd originally bought to wear to Adrian's office party, which was deliciously ironic. She was turning his lie into her power move, and I respected that immensely. The hardest part was dealing with my mom. She called me 3 times that week to talk about Christmas dinner preparations, and every single time she brought up Adrian like he was some kind of honored guest we should all be excited to meet. "Chloe tells me Adrian is such a nice young man," she said during one call, and I had to grip my phone so tight I nearly cracked the screen. "It's very charitable of you both to include him during the holidays. Your father and I raised you right." Oh, Mom. Sweet, naive Mom who thought her son was being mature and charitable when really her son was orchestrating the most dramatic dinner party since the Last Supper. I wanted to tell her everything, to warn her that Christmas was going to be less silent night and more explosive night, But I kept my mouth shut. The surprise needed to be complete. Everyone needed to see this unfold in real time, without warning, without the ability to prepare or make excuses or try to smooth things over before the truth came out. My sister Jade called me too, mostly to complain about having to wrangle her twin boys for a formal dinner, but she also mentioned Adrian. "Mom says you're bringing Chloe's ex to Christmas. That's weird, right? Or am I being judgmental?" I told her she wasn't being judgmental, that it was definitely weird, but that I was trying to be the bigger person. She laughed and said, "You're a better man than Dad would have been. He would have lost his mind." Little did she know that I had absolutely lost my mind. I just lost it in a very calculated, strategic direction. At work, I was basically useless. I'd sit at my desk staring at spreadsheets that might as well have been written in ancient Greek for all the attention I was paying them. My coworker Brad asked me if I was feeling okay, because apparently I'd been smiling to myself randomly throughout the day like some kind of creep. I told him I was just excited for Christmas, which wasn't technically a lie. I was extremely excited for Christmas, just not for the reasons he thought. Every night, I'd come home to Chloe being aggressively cheerful and domestic. She'd greet me at the door with a kiss on the cheek, ask about my day, serve dinner that she'd actually cooked instead of ordering takeout like we usually did. It was like she was overcompensating, trying extra hard to be the perfect wife. Probably because some part of her guilty conscience was screaming at her that she was doing something wrong. But she'd push that feeling down, rationalize it away, tell herself that she was just being a good person who was helping out a friend. The texts between her and Adrian continued. Of course, I checked her phone every night after she fell asleep, watching their messages like they were episodes of the worst TV show. They'd talk about Christmas dinner, about how excited they were to see each other, about how nice it would be to catch up in person. Adrian would say things like, "Can't wait to see you," and Chloe would respond with smiley faces and hearts. Not "I love you" hearts or anything that explicit. She was still smart enough to maintain plausible deniability, but the kind of hearts that definitely meant more than just friendship. I screenshot everything, building my case like a lawyer preparing for trial. Clara was doing the same thing on her end, documenting every lie Adrian told her about his whereabouts and his plans. We'd compare notes, share our findings, and basically become the world's most depressing pen pals. But there was something empowering about it too, about knowing that we weren't going to be victims here. We were going to be the ones who pulled back the curtain and showed everyone who these people really were. The night before Christmas, Chloe was practically vibrating with excitement. She spent 3 hours getting everything ready for the next day, wrapping last-minute presents, laying out her outfit, making a checklist of things to bring to my parents' house. She was humming "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas" while she worked, completely oblivious to the fact that tomorrow was going to be anything but merry for her. I sat on the couch watching her buzz around like a festive bee, and I felt this weird mix of emotions. Part of me was sad. This was my wife, someone I'd loved and built a life with, and I was watching that life crumble in real time. But the bigger part of me, the part that was currently winning the internal battle, was absolutely ready for justice. She'd made her choices. She'd lied, gone behind my back, prioritized her ex-boyfriend's feelings over her husband's dignity. And tomorrow, she was going to face the consequences of those choices in front of everyone who mattered. "Are you excited for tomorrow?" she asked me, plopping down on the couch next to me with a glass of wine, her cheeks flushed from running around all evening. I turned to her and smiled, that same smile I'd been perfecting all week, the one that looked genuine but was actually just a mask covering the chaos underneath. "Absolutely," I said. "I think tomorrow's going to be unforgettable." "You're being so amazing about all this," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "Seriously, Daniel, not every husband would be this understanding. I'm really lucky to have you." I wrapped my arm around her, still smiling, and said, "Don't mention it. I'm just trying to be mature about the whole thing." Mature. That word again. It had become my mantra, my catchphrase, my inside joke with myself. Every time someone said I was being mature, I wanted to laugh hysterically because they had no idea what kind of mature I was actually being. I wasn't being doormat mature or pushover mature. I was being chess player mature, strategic mature, long game mature. The kind of mature that waits for exactly the right moment to flip the board and watch all the pieces scatter. That night, I barely slept again. Not from anxiety this time, but from anticipation. Tomorrow was Christmas. Tomorrow was showtime. Tomorrow was the day that Adrian and Chloe's little fantasy world came crashing down, and I was going to have a front row seat to the whole thing. Actually, forget front row seat. I was the director, the producer, and the guy selling popcorn in the lobby. Clara texted me at around midnight. "Still good for tomorrow? I'm nervous, but ready." I texted back, "Still good. See you at 2:45. This is going to be legendary." And honestly, I believed it, because if there's one thing I'd learned over the past week of pretending everything was fine while secretly planning the most dramatic Christmas dinner in the history of awkward family gatherings, it's that being mature doesn't mean being passive. Sometimes being mature means standing up for yourself. Sometimes it means holding people accountable. And sometimes, just sometimes, it means orchestrating the perfect moment of truth with the precision of a Swiss watch and the drama of a soap opera finale. Merry Christmas to me. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of perfect weather that makes you believe in divine intervention, or at least really good luck. The sky was clear and blue, the sun was shining but not too hot, and there was just enough of a breeze to make it feel like an actual holiday, instead of just another day in suburban America where everyone pretends to like each other for the sake of tradition. I woke up around 7, looked over at Chloe, still sleeping peacefully like she wasn't about to have the worst Christmas of her entire life, and I felt this surge of energy that I can only describe as pure, unfiltered anticipation mixed with a healthy dose of vindication. We got to my parents' house around noon, our car loaded down with presents and the fancy desserts Chloe had spent all week making. My childhood home looked exactly like it always did during the holidays. Lights strung up along the roof that my dad had definitely complained about hanging but secretly loved, a wreath on the front door that was slightly crooked because my mom insisted on doing it herself, and the sound of chaos already emanating from inside because apparently my sister's twins had arrived early and were already tearing through the place like tiny, adorable tornadoes. Walking through that front door felt like entering a time capsule. The house smelled like turkey and stuffing and all those carbs that you pretend you're not going to eat too much of but absolutely will. My mom had outdone herself with the decorations. There were garlands everywhere, candles on every surface that wasn't occupied by food, and a Christmas tree in the living room that was so covered in ornaments you could barely see the actual tree underneath. It was excessive and over the top and absolutely perfect, which pretty much summed up my mom's approach to everything in life. "Daniel! Chloe!" My mom appeared from the kitchen wearing an apron that said Santa's favorite chef and wielding a wooden spoon like a weapon. She pulled both of us into a hug that smelled like cinnamon and wine, which meant she'd already been taste testing her cooking for quality control purposes. "I'm so glad you're here. The turkey is taking forever. Your father has already had 3 glasses of whiskey, even though I told him to pace himself. And your sister's boys just knocked over a lamp, but it didn't break, so we're calling it a Christmas miracle." This was exactly the kind of controlled chaos I'd grown up with. And normally, it would have made me smile with genuine warmth. But today, knowing what was coming, it felt more like the calm before a Category 5 hurricane. I was about to turn this Norman Rockwell painting into a Jackson Pollock splatter piece. And part of me felt guilty about it, but only a very small part. The rest of me was ready to watch this whole thing burn in the most spectacular way possible. My dad was in the living room, planted in his recliner like he'd been surgically attached to it, watching football with the volume way too loud because he refused to admit his hearing wasn't what it used to be.
He raised his glass of whiskey in greeting when he saw me, already looking happy and buzzed in that way that suggested he'd started drinking around 10 in the morning. "Daniel, come test this whiskey with me. Your mother says I'm drinking too much, but I say it's Christmas, and Jesus would want me to be happy." I'm 99% sure that's not how theology works, but I wasn't about to argue with my dad's Christmas logic. I poured myself a drink, I was definitely going to need it, and sat down with him for a few minutes, watching grown men chase a ball around a field while commentators talked about it like it was a matter of national security. My sister, Jade, appeared shortly after, looking exhausted in that special way that only parents of young children can achieve. Her hair was in a messy ponytail, she had what looked like jelly stains on her shirt, and her eyes had that 1,000-yard stare that suggested she'd been up since 5 in the morning, dealing with twins hopped up on Christmas excitement and sugar. "Daniel, thank God you're here. Please tell me you brought alcohol stronger than wine, because I'm going to need it to survive today." If only she knew that the alcohol wasn't for surviving the twins. It was going to be for surviving the dinner theater production I was about to stage in approximately 2 hours. But I just smiled and told her there was plenty of whiskey and she should definitely help herself. Chloe was in the kitchen with my mom, doing that thing where women bond over cooking and gossip. I could hear them laughing about something, probably some story my mom was telling about my dad's latest DIY project that had gone horribly wrong. Chloe looked completely at ease, comfortable, like she belonged here, like she wasn't about to get exposed as a lying, manipulative person who'd invited her ex-boyfriend to her husband's family dinner while carrying on an emotional affair behind everyone's backs. The next hour passed in a blur of typical Christmas activities. The twins opened some presents early because they couldn't wait, and my sister had given up on discipline hours ago. My dad alternated between watching football and supervising the turkey, which really just meant opening the oven every 10 minutes to stare at it and declare it not ready yet. My mom stressed about side dishes and whether she'd made enough food, even though she'd made enough to feed a small army and we all knew there would be leftovers for weeks. And me? I was checking my phone every 5 minutes, waiting for Clara's text confirming she was on her way. I told her to arrive around 2:45, which would give Adrian just enough time to get comfortable and let his guard down before the hammer dropped. The plan was simple but effective. Let Adrian arrive, let everyone meet him and welcome him, let Chloe feel good about her charitable decision, and then, boom, Clara walks in and the whole house of cards collapses. At 2:15, right on schedule, the doorbell rang. My mom literally squealed with excitement, which was slightly disturbing, but also very on brand for her. "That must be Adrian! Oh, I'm so excited to meet him! Chloe has told me so much about what a nice young man he is." I watched Chloe's face light up like someone had plugged her into an electrical socket. She practically ran to the door, smoothing down her dress and checking her hair in the hallway mirror before opening it. And there he was, Adrian Kershaw in the flesh, looking exactly like the kind of guy who would pull this kind of nonsense. He was tall, I'll give him that, with dark hair styled in that "I woke up like this but actually spent 20 minutes on it" way that guys do when they're trying too hard. He was wearing a navy blue sweater that probably cost more than my car payment and holding a bottle of wine that definitely cost more than my car payment. He had that confident, charming smile that probably worked on most people, the kind of smile that said, "I'm a good guy, you can trust me," while simultaneously being completely untrustworthy. "Adrian, come in, come in." Chloe pulled him into a hug that lasted approximately 4 seconds too long to be appropriate for someone who was just a friend. I watched from my position in the living room, drink in hand, smile plastered on my face, looking like the world's most understanding husband, while internally I was counting down the minutes until this whole charade exploded. Adrian came in, bringing with him a wave of expensive cologne that probably had a name like Deception or Betrayal or something equally ironic.
He handed the wine to my mom, who accepted it like he'd just gifted her the Holy Grail, and then he made his rounds, shaking hands and introducing himself to everyone. He had this whole routine down: firm handshake, eye contact, self-deprecating humor about how he hoped he wasn't intruding on family time. It was a performance, and honestly, it was pretty good. I could see why Chloe had fallen for this guy originally, and why she was apparently still hung up on him. When he got to me, he extended his hand with that same confident smile. "Daniel, right, man? I really appreciate you being cool with me crashing your family Christmas. Chloe told me you're a really understanding guy." I shook his hand, probably gripping it a little harder than necessary, and smiled right back at him. "Of course, Adrian. Any friend of Chloe's is welcome here. I'm all about being mature and understanding." I put just enough emphasis on the word mature that only I would catch it, a little inside joke with myself about what was coming. My dad got Adrian a drink, my mom went back to fussing over the turkey, and everyone settled into that pre-dinner mingling phase where people stand around making small talk and pretending they're not just waiting to eat. Adrian and Chloe gravitated toward each other naturally, standing just a little too close, laughing just a little too loud at each other's jokes. My sister noticed it too. I caught her giving me a questioning look from across the room like, "Is this weird or is it just me?" I gave her a subtle nod that said, "Oh, it's definitely weird. Just wait." Adrian was working the room like a politician at a fundraiser, charming my mom with compliments about her decorating, bonding with my dad over some sports team they both apparently followed, even getting down on the floor to play with my sister's twins for a minute to show what a great guy he was. And through it all, Chloe was watching him with this look in her eyes that made my stomach turn. It was admiration mixed with nostalgia, mixed with something that definitely wasn't appropriate for a married woman looking at her ex-boyfriend. 2:30 came and went. 2:40 arrived. I checked my phone again. Clara had texted 15 minutes ago saying she was 10 minutes away and asking if I was sure about this. I'd responded with, "Absolutely sure. See you soon." Now it was just a waiting game, watching the clock tick down to the moment when Christmas dinner turned into Christmas drama. At 2:43, my mom announced that dinner would be ready in about 15 minutes and everyone should start thinking about sitting down. People began migrating toward the dining room, where my mom had set up the table like we were hosting a presidential banquet. There were place cards, fancy napkins folded into shapes I couldn't identify, enough silverware to confuse an etiquette expert, and a centerpiece that probably violated some fire codes with the number of candles involved. Adrian and Chloe were laughing about something together near the window, completely in their own little world, when I heard it. The sound I'd been waiting for. The doorbell. That simple ding-dong that was about to change everything. The room got quiet for a second, everyone looking around in confusion because we weren't expecting anyone else. My mom glanced at my dad, who shrugged. My sister looked at me with raised eyebrows. Adrian and Chloe's laughter died off, both of them looking toward the door with mild curiosity. "I'll get it," I said, setting down my drink and standing up with the kind of calm purpose that suggested I knew exactly who was on the other side of that door. Because I did. I absolutely did. I walked to the front door, very aware that everyone was watching me, probably wondering who could possibly be arriving this late to Christmas dinner. I took a deep breath, put my hand on the doorknob, and opened it, with a smile that was probably a little too eager given the circumstances. There she was. Clara Mills, red sweater, nervous smile, clutching a bottle of wine like it was emotional support, looking both terrified and determined in equal measure. Standing there in the doorway, looking at Clara's face, I had this weird moment of clarity where I realized there was no going back from this. Once she stepped through that door, once she entered my parents' house and everyone saw her, the dominoes would start falling, and there would be no way to stop them. This was the point of no return, the moment where I either committed to blowing up my marriage in front of my entire family on Christmas Day,
Or I chickened out and sent Clara away and lived the rest of my life as the guy who let his wife walk all over him. And honestly, there was no universe where I was choosing option 2. "Clara," I said, loud enough that people inside could hear me, my voice warm and welcoming, like she was an old friend I'd been expecting all along. "I'm so glad you could make it. Come on in." She stepped inside, and I could feel the shift in the room's energy immediately. It was like someone had pressed pause on a movie. Everyone just froze mid-conversation, mid-movement, mid-everything. My mom was halfway to the kitchen with an empty serving dish. My dad had his whiskey glass raised to his lips but hadn't taken the sip yet. My sister was bent down talking to one of the twins, but her head snapped up so fast I'm surprised she didn't get whiplash. And Chloe? Chloe's face was absolutely priceless. She went from happy and glowing to confused to horrified in about 2 seconds flat, like watching someone's soul leave their body in real time. But the real show was Adrian. This man, this smooth-talking, confident, charming man who'd been working the room like he owned the place, suddenly looked like he'd seen a ghost. Actually, worse than a ghost. He looked like he'd seen his fiancée at his ex-girlfriend's husband's family Christmas dinner, which is exactly what was happening, because that's exactly what she was. All the color drained from his face so fast, I was genuinely concerned he might pass out right there on my parents' Persian rug that my mom was weirdly protective of. "Clara?" Adrian's voice came out strangled, like someone was squeezing his throat. He actually took a step backward, bumping into the side table and nearly knocking over one of my mom's decorative candles. "What? What are you doing here?" Clara, to her absolute credit, didn't falter. She stood there in her red sweater, holding that wine bottle, and smiled in a way that was equal parts sweet and terrifying. It was the smile of someone who had reached their limit and was now operating on pure adrenaline and righteous anger. "I was invited," she said, her voice steady and clear. Then she turned to me, her eyes showing just a flicker of appreciation. "By your ex-girlfriend's husband. Daniel invited me." The silence that followed was so complete, you could have heard a snowflake land outside. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. I'm pretty sure time itself stopped for a solid 5 seconds while everyone's brains tried to process what was happening. My sister's mouth was literally hanging open. My dad had finally lowered his whiskey glass and was staring at the scene unfolding in front of him like it was the most entertaining thing he'd seen all year, which it probably was. My mom looked completely confused, her eyes darting between me, Clara, Adrian, and Chloe like she was watching a tennis match played by 4 people simultaneously. I took Clara's wine bottle and her coat, playing the perfect host, smiling like this was all completely normal and planned. "Everyone, this is Clara Mills. Clara, this is my family. My mom, Susan, my dad, Frank, my sister, Jade, and her twins, Tyler and Mason. And I believe you already know Adrian here." "Know him?" Clara's voice had an edge to it now, that polite veneer starting to crack just a little. "I'm engaged to him. Or at least I was, until about 3 days ago when I found out he's been lying to me about where he'd be spending Christmas." You could have heard a pin drop in that moment. Actually, you could have heard a pin thinking about dropping. The silence was so thick and heavy, it was almost a physical presence in the room. My mom made this little gasping sound, her hand flying to her chest like she was clutching pearls she wasn't actually wearing. My sister whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath, but in the silence, it sounded like she'd screamed it through a megaphone. Adrian finally found his voice, though it came out about 3 octaves higher than normal. "Clara, this isn't what it looks like. I can explain. This is just a misunderstanding, really."
Clara took a step further into the room, and I've got to say, watching her transform from nervous to confrontational was like watching a superhero origin story in real time. You told me you were going to a work party, a mandatory work party at your Jewish boss's house, remember? You were very specific about the details, Adrian. So, either you lied to me about this dinner, or you lied to these people about having a work party. Which is it? Chloe finally unfroze, her face cycling through about 17 different emotions before settling on defensive anger. She turned to me, her eyes blazing, her voice shaking with a mixture of fury and humiliation. Daniel, what the hell is this? How could you invite her here, to your parents' house, on Christmas? I set Clara's wine bottle down on the entry table with exaggerated care, then turned to my wife with the calmest, most reasonable expression I could manage. Inside, I was doing cartwheels. Outside, I was the picture of mature rationality. I was just being mature about the situation, sweetheart. You know, like you asked me to. When you invited your ex-boyfriend to my family's Christmas dinner without really discussing it with me first, I figured if we're welcoming old flames to family gatherings, we might as well make it fair and invite Adrian's current flame too. Equal opportunity holiday inclusion and all that. My dad made a sound that was somewhere between a cough and a laugh, quickly covering it by taking a long drink of his whiskey. My sister wasn't even trying to hide her reaction anymore. She had pulled out her phone and was definitely recording this, her eyes sparkling with the kind of joy that comes from witnessing truly spectacular drama that doesn't directly involve you. This is completely different. Chloe's voice was getting higher, more desperate. She looked around the room like she was searching for allies, but everyone was just staring at her with various expressions of shock, confusion, and, in my dad's case, barely concealed amusement. Adrian was going through a hard time. I was trying to be charitable. Charitable? Clara laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was the laugh of someone who'd been pushed too far and was now done with everyone's nonsense. Is that what we're calling emotional affairs now? Charity work? Because I've seen the messages, Chloe. Daniel sent me screenshots. All those "I miss you" and "what if we tried harder" texts. That's not charity. That's something else entirely. Adrian tried to approach Clara, his hands up in a placating gesture, like he was trying to calm down a wild animal. Clara, baby, please. Those messages were taken out of context. Chloe and I are just old friends catching up. There's nothing going on between us. Then why did you lie to me about coming here? Clara shot back, not backing down an inch. If this was just innocent friend stuff, why make up an elaborate story? Why not just tell me the truth that you were having Christmas dinner with your ex-girlfriend and her husband's family? Because I knew you'd overreact. Adrian's frustration was showing now, his careful charm cracking under pressure. I knew you'd make it into something it wasn't. Oh, I'm overreacting? Clara's voice went up a notch. You've been texting your ex about missing her and wondering about what could have been. You lied to me about your whereabouts on Christmas, and somehow I'm the one who's overreacting? That's rich, Adrian. That's really rich. My mom, who had been standing frozen in shock this entire time, finally found her voice. It came out small and confused, like a child trying to understand a complicated math problem. I don't understand what's happening. Susan, can someone explain what's happening? My sister, bless her chaotic heart, stepped in to help. Mom, apparently Chloe invited her ex-boyfriend to Christmas dinner, told Daniel to be mature about it, but forgot to mention that said ex-boyfriend is engaged to someone else and has been having an emotional affair with Chloe. And Daniel, being the absolute legend that he is, invited the fiancée to dinner too. So now we're all here together. It's like a Hallmark movie, but way more entertaining. Jade! My mom looked scandalized, though I noticed she didn't actually disagree with the assessment. Chloe turned her fury on me again, tears starting to form in her eyes now. You went through my phone! You invaded my privacy! That's illegal! Actually, it's not, I said calmly, because I'd looked this up during one of my many sleepless nights this week. We're married. Legally, there's no expectation of privacy between spouses regarding shared devices and accounts. But nice try with the deflection. Very mature of you. There was that word again. Mature. It was becoming my favorite weapon in this whole mess. Adrian and Chloe started talking over each other, both of them trying to explain and justify and rationalize what had been happening. Adrian insisted it was just friendship, that Clara was overreacting, that the messages didn't mean anything serious. Chloe claimed she was just being kind to someone going through a difficult time, that I was making it into something it wasn't, that I'd betrayed her trust by going through her phone. Their stories didn't match. Adrian's version contradicted Chloe's, and neither of them seemed to notice or care. They were too busy trying to save themselves to realize they were sinking each other's lifeboats. It was glorious. Absolutely spectacularly glorious. This was better than any movie, any TV show, any piece of entertainment I'd ever witnessed. This was real-life karma playing out in real time, and I had orchestrated the whole thing. Clara watched them spiral with this expression of disgusted fascination, like she was watching a car crash in slow motion and couldn't look away. Finally, she'd had enough. She held up her hand, silencing both of them mid-excuse. You know what? I don't actually care about your explanations anymore. I don't care about the justifications or the excuses or whatever mental gymnastics you're both doing to make yourselves feel better about this. What I care about is that you're both liars. You lied to me, Adrian. You lied to Derek, Chloe. You lied to yourselves if you think this was ever going to end well.
She took off her engagement ring, this beautiful, expensive-looking thing that probably cost more than my car, and held it up in the light for a second. Then she walked over to where Adrian was standing, dropped the ring into his hand like it was a piece of trash, and said with perfect, cold clarity, "We're done. Lose my number, lose my address, lose any memory you have of me, because I'm sure as hell going to forget you ever existed." Then she turned on her heel and walked straight toward the front door. But before she left, she stopped next to me, put her hand on my shoulder, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Thanks for inviting me, Daniel. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. Merry Christmas." And with that, Clara Mills walked out of my parents' house and out of Adrian's life, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt like the entire world had stopped spinning. The silence after Clara left lasted for maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like 10 years. Everyone just stood there frozen, like we were all extras in a movie who'd forgotten our lines and were waiting for the director to yell, "Cut," so we could reset and try again. Except there was no director, no reset button, and this train wreck was still very much in motion. Adrian was standing there holding his engagement ring like it was a live grenade, his face a fascinating shade of pale green that suggested he might actually throw up on my parents' hardwood floors. And Chloe? Chloe looked like her entire world had just collapsed, which, to be fair, it kinda had. Then Adrian broke the silence by doing exactly what cowards do when they're caught. He tried damage control. "Clara, wait!" He lunged toward the door, nearly tripping over one of my nephew's toy trucks that had been left on the floor. "Clara, this isn't what it looks like. Please, just let me explain." But Clara was already gone, her car door slamming outside with a finality that echoed through the whole house. I heard her engine start, heard the tires squeal slightly as she peeled out of the driveway, and I smiled. Good for her. That woman deserved so much better than Adrian Kershaw and his carefully constructed web of lies. Adrian stood at the door for a second, staring out at where Clara's car had been, looking utterly defeated. Then he spun around and fixed his eyes on me with the kind of anger that comes from someone realizing they've been outplayed. "What the hell, man? Why would you do that?
Why would you invite her here? I leaned against the wall, crossed my arms, and gave him my best, "Are you seriously asking me that question?" Gee, Adrian, I don't know. Maybe because you're engaged and planning a wedding, but spending your free time texting my wife about how much you miss her. Maybe because you lied to Clara about where you'd be tonight. Or, and here's a wild thought, maybe because you're a lying, manipulative dirtbag who deserved to get called out in the most public way possible. You had no right. Adrian was getting loud now, his voice echoing off my parents' walls in a way that made my mom visibly wince. That was between me and Clara. You didn't need to get involved. Oh, but it was totally fine for you to get involved in my marriage? I pushed off the wall, taking a step toward him. It was cool for you to text my wife at all hours, reminisce about your relationship, talk about what could have been? That was fine. But me inviting your fiancé to meet you is crossing a line? The audacity is honestly impressive, man. My dad, who'd been watching this whole thing unfold with the fascination of someone watching a nature documentary, finally spoke up. Son's got a point there, Adrian. You can't really play the victim card when you're actively participating in whatever the hell this situation is. Adrian opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Chloe finally found her voice. She turned on me with a fury I'd rarely seen from her, her face red, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Daniel, how could you do this? How could you humiliate me like this in front of your entire family on Christmas?" And there it was. Not, "I'm sorry for what I did." Not, "I'm sorry for lying to you." Not, "I'm sorry for emotionally cheating with my ex-boyfriend." No, it was, "How could you humiliate me?" Like she was the victim in this scenario. Like I was the bad guy for pulling back the curtain on her deception. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I felt something inside me just snap. Not in an angry way, but in a final, decisive way. Like a cord being cut. I humiliated you? My voice was calm, almost eerily calm, which somehow made it more effective than if I'd been yelling. I humiliated you by exposing the truth? Chloe, you humiliated yourself. You invited your ex-boyfriend to my parents' house for Christmas dinner. You went behind my back to get my mom's approval. You've been having an emotional affair with a man who's engaged to someone else? You did all of that. I just provided the lighting and the audience. It wasn't an affair. Chloe was crying harder now, her voice breaking. We were just talking. He's my friend. I was trying to help him through a difficult time. What difficult time? I spread my arms wide, gesturing at Adrian, who was still standing by the door looking like he wanted to melt into the floor. The difficult time of planning a wedding to a woman he was lying to? The difficult time of juggling an emotional affair with you while maintaining his relationship with Clara? Those difficult times? Adrian jumped in, probably sensing that Chloe was drowning and trying to throw her a life preserver even though they were both already underwater. Look, Daniel, Chloe's right. It wasn't like that. We were just friends catching up. The messages were taken out of context. Out of context? I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the screenshots I'd saved, and started reading out loud. Adrian, I miss what we had. Things were so simple back then. You know, we just got each other. Chloe, I know. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we tried harder, if we'd been more mature back then. I looked up from my phone. What context makes that appropriate for a married woman to her ex-boyfriend? Please enlighten me. I'm dying to know. My sister, who'd been quietly recording this entire exchange on her phone like she was documenting history, let out a low whistle. Damn, Daniel, you came prepared. This is better than anything on Netflix. Jade, not now, my mom hissed, but I noticed she didn't actually tell her to stop recording. Chloe was fully sobbing at this point, those big, heaving sobs that made her whole body shake. You went through my phone. You invaded my privacy. That's a violation of trust. Oh, we're talking about violations of trust now? I couldn't help but laugh, though it came out bitter. That's rich, Chloe. That's really rich.
You know what's a violation of trust? Inviting your ex to Christmas dinner without really discussing it with your husband. Having inappropriate conversations with said ex while you're married. Going behind my back to my own mother to get approval for something you knew I wouldn't be okay with. Those are violations of trust. Me checking your phone after you dropped the bomb on our marriage? That's called gathering evidence. Adrian tried a different approach, switching from anger to pleading. Look, man, I'm sorry. You're right. The messages were inappropriate. I shouldn't have said those things. But nothing physical happened between us. It was just talk. We never crossed that line. Oh, well, that makes it all better, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You only emotionally cheated. You only lied to your fiancé. You only helped destroy my marriage with words instead of actions. Totally fine then. My bad for overreacting. Daniel, please. Chloe reached for my arm, but I stepped back. Please, can we just talk about this privately? Not here, not in front of everyone. I shook my head. You made this public when you invited Adrian to my family's Christmas dinner. You made this everyone's business. You don't get to control the narrative now that it's blown up in your face. My dad cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. He'd been relatively quiet during this whole exchange, just sipping his whiskey and watching like he was front row at the world's most uncomfortable theater production. I think, he said slowly, his voice carrying the kind of authority that comes from being a father and having zero patience for nonsense, that what we have here is a failure of basic respect and honesty. Chloe, you're my daughter-in-law, and I've always liked you, but what you did here was wrong, dead wrong. You don't invite an ex to your husband's family gathering without a real conversation about it first, and you definitely don't do it while carrying on inappropriate conversations with said ex. He turned to Adrian. And you, son, need to get your priorities straight. You were engaged to a woman who seemed lovely from the 30 seconds I saw her, and you threw that away to play footsie with your ex-girlfriend who's married to someone else. That's not just stupid, that's disrespectful to everyone involved. Coming from my dad, who usually avoided family drama like it was contagious, this was basically the equivalent of a presidential address. Even Adrian and Chloe seemed momentarily stunned into silence. My mom, ever the one to try to salvage situations, wrung her hands nervously. Maybe we should all just sit down and have dinner, talk about this calmly over turkey. Susan, I love you, but read the room, my dad said gently. Nobody's in the mood for turkey right now. I turned to Chloe, and I felt this strange sense of calm wash over me. The anger was gone. The hurt was still there, but it was manageable now. What I felt most strongly was clarity. Chloe, I want you to leave. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. What? I want you to leave. Go stay with your sister. Go stay in a hotel. I don't really care. But I don't want you in our house tonight. Or any night, actually. We're done. Daniel, no, please don't do this. She was pleading now, reaching for me again. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. I took another step back, maintaining distance between us. There's nothing to fix, Chloe. You made your choices. You chose to prioritize Adrian's feelings over mine. You chose to lie to me. You chose to have inappropriate conversations with your ex wearing my wedding ring. Those were all your choices, and now I'm making mine. You're overreacting, she said, her voice taking on a desperate edge. You're being dramatic. It's just because you're hurt right now. Give it a few days and you'll see that this isn't worth throwing away our whole marriage. My sister made a scoffing sound. Girl, he's not overreacting. If my husband pulled this, I'd have thrown his stuff out the window by now. Jade, helpful, I said, though I appreciated the support. I looked back at Chloe. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being rational. You betrayed my trust in multiple ways. You showed me who you really are, and I'm choosing to believe you and act accordingly. My mom stepped forward, looking torn between wanting to comfort everyone and wanting to take sides. "Daniel, honey, are you sure about this? It's Christmas. Maybe everyone just needs to cool down and talk about this tomorrow when emotions aren't so high." "Mom, I love you, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life." I kept my eyes on Chloe. "You can stay with your sister until we figure out the divorce paperwork. I'll have my lawyer contact you next week." The word divorce hung in the air like a bomb, and Chloe actually gasped like I'd physically hit her. "You can't be serious. Daniel, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll stop talking to Adrian. I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't leave me." But here's the thing. I'd heard enough apologies that weren't really apologies. I'd seen enough tears that were more about getting caught than being genuinely sorry. And I was done. Completely, utterly done. "Chloe, leave, now, before I say things I'll regret and that my mother definitely doesn't want to hear." My voice was still calm, and I think she finally realized I wasn't budging. She looked around the room one more time, maybe hoping someone would come to her defense, but everyone was either looking away or looking at her with varying degrees of disappointment. Even my mom, who usually tried to see the best in everyone, couldn't quite meet her eyes. Finally, Chloe grabbed her purse and coat with shaking hands, shot me one last look that was equal parts devastation and fury, and stormed out. Adrian followed her like a lost puppy, mumbling something about giving her a ride because she was too upset to drive safely. The door slammed behind them with enough force to rattle the windows. And suddenly, it was just me, my family, and the most awkward silence in Christmas history. My mom was the first to speak, her voice soft and worried. "Daniel, sweetheart, are you okay?" I surprised myself by actually meaning it when I said, "Yeah, Mom, I really am." My dad walked over and put his hand on my shoulder, giving it a squeeze. "Son, that took guts. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." My sister was still holding her phone, a huge grin on her face. Dude, that was legendary. Seriously, that was the most epic thing I've ever witnessed.
I ended up staying at my parents' house that night, sleeping in my old childhood bedroom with the same posters on the walls from high school. It was weirdly comforting, like going back to a simpler time before marriages and betrayals and dramatic Christmas dinners. My phone was blowing up with texts from Chloe. 17 messages ranging from, "You're being cruel and unreasonable," to, "Please, let's just talk about this like adults," to, "I never meant to hurt you." I replied exactly once, "Talk to my lawyer." Then I muted her number and finally got some actual sleep for the first time in weeks. My sister had already uploaded the dinner footage to our extended family group chat, and by morning, my phone had about 40 notifications from cousins, aunts, uncles, and even my grandmother asking what the hell happened and if I was okay. 2 months later, the divorce papers were signed and finalized. Chloe didn't contest anything, probably too embarrassed to drag this out in court where more people would hear about what she'd done. I moved back into our house after she cleared out her stuff, and honestly, it felt lighter somehow, like a weight I didn't know I'd been carrying had finally lifted. Clara and I met for coffee a few weeks after Christmas, not for romance, but for closure. We laughed about how absolutely insane that dinner had been, how we'd both dodged bullets shaped like lying significant others. She thanked me for exposing the truth before she'd married Adrian, and I thanked her for having the courage to show up and blow everything wide open. Chloe sent me an email eventually, saying she never meant to hurt me and hoped we could be friends someday. I archived it under a folder I labeled Seasonal Comedy and never looked at it again.